God save the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the I Don't Belong Here show, and I am your host, Samantha Beningo. Today, I'm just doing a very short follow-up video based on a couple of things that I stumbled upon since my last video, which was about the Canton Police audit and the taillight. Now, in my investigation for that, I did stumble upon three things that I want to mention here. Also note, I am using StreamYard for the first time, and so this might be a little funky because my sister and I, hopefully my sister will join me for my first live, which I'm very excited about, but I have no idea how to use any of the live functions. So I'm trying to get ready for that. And as I mentioned, I'm finishing up my last classwork semester of my PhD program. I'm in the final week. It is torture. Every second I have to be doing schoolwork, so there will not be any live for me until I'm on the other side of that. Having said that, let me briefly mention these few things. First, as I was reviewing the scene photos from the Canton Police audit, at the time, I was looking at those photos and noticing the red blood droplets and thinking about the taillight. Like, look, we can see the red droplets. Obviously, they had a leaf blower out there. You can see the ground. We would see taillight pieces, particularly because they're saying there was taillight in John's clothing. So doesn't it stand to reason that if there was taillight in John's clothing, then the taillight would have been with John? But there's no taillight found when the first group of officers stumble upon the scene. And yes, it's true. They are the most incompetent group of people that has ever lived. But the taillight would have been there. That is not a question. So then you have to start asking, well, how does taillight show up? And don't you think it's a little funny that the CERT team at 5:30 later that same day were directed to look for taillight? And oh yeah, then they stumble upon it and then they leave immediately following the collection of the taillight. Like, nope, we don't need to do anything else. There it is. We've got the evidence we need. And that was the explicit direction they were given. Look for taillight. It's like, come on, you guys. This is anyway. But that's not why we're talking. That's not what I'm doing here now. I'm just explaining that at the time I was looking at those blood droplets thinking, wow, those are really bright red. Geez, if there was taillight, we would see it. We would definitely see it. All right. According to everybody, the amount of blood loss that John O'Keefe would have had from the injuries would have been excessive. Okay? Would have been excessive. So there would have been a pile of blood underneath him, under his head wound. So if there isn't a pile of blood underneath him, where is that blood? I mean, that would have been the first thing that any seasoned detective probably notes about this scene. I have to believe that if you ask any seasoned detective, a person who studies crime scenes, like go get Joe Kenda and ask him, when you get to this scene, what's the first thing that you notice? Oh, there's this gaping head wound, but there's no puddle of blood underneath the head wound around this man. That seems to me to be pretty suspicious. And maybe that, if you are a competent human being, maybe that tips you off that this is not just an accident. Something is fishy. This body was moved. I mean, right? If you were even like a thinking person, and clearly we know that the Canton Police Department is not filled with thinking people. I mean, that to me is like at the baseline of what we take away from the audit, right? At the very baseline, that is what we take away. And there's a number of other things about the audit that I have since kind of sat with. I listened to The Lawyer You Know. I listened to some of Melanie Little's coverage. I also listened to lots of other people. My information is a lot more informed now by legal professionals. And right at the beginning, what I noticed was certainly this information is going to point the defense in the direction of being able to impeach witnesses. That seemed obvious even to me, based on the little legal knowledge I know and have. Obviously, I also knew they weren't going to be able to bring this document into evidence, but simply that they would be able to either they were pointed in the direction of policy and procedure they could use to impeach witnesses or could use the recommendations to impeach witnesses. However, two things. One that Melanie Little pointed out, which is that the recommendations at the end, there's a summary that says, we hope you hire us to help with this process of implementing change. So it's like, oh, so clearly they were going to paint this police department in the best possible light because they wanted to get hired. And I guess they were paid like hundreds of thousands of dollars for this audit. So it's like, okay, wait, clearly these people are incentivized to make these guys look good. Number one. Number two, most of them are former police detectives, department officials, whatever, what have you, FBI potentially. I don't know who these guys are specifically, but that's typically what these audit companies are made up of, former law enforcement. So it's like, how unbiased are they off the top? And then finally, they say they're not going to make recommendations. They're not going to evaluate the evidence. They're not here to say whether there was somebody's guilty or innocent. But then the entire thing, soup to nuts, reads like they're just defending why it is that, there was a lot of incompetence, but don't look at that. Here's why she probably did do it. It's like total absurdity, right? It's like, well, they're just totally incompetent. Like, you can't really blame them. And yeah, she probably did it anyway. I mean, here's the evidence to support why she probably did do it. And yeah, it's really unfair that the defense is making this argument unjustly against these guys because clearly they weren't intentionally doing anything wrong. They're just totally incompetent. And then the defense is, making this big deal about, okay, there was intentional corruption, and now all these social media bad guys are blowing it out of proportion, and these poor little police officers are being unjustly crucified, they're being attacked, they're being emailed and harassed, there's people protesting outside of the police department. It's so unfair. But no, this is completely objective. This is an objective, unbiased audit. So it's like, all right, enough with this audit. And then finally, and this was interesting, and I didn't catch this. I don't know how many times I've read Michael Proctor's text messages to his buddies. I mean, countless at this point. But for some reason, as I was looking at it again and editing that last video about the audit, I noticed something about Proctor's text message that I had never noticed before. So let me see if I can bring this up so you can see it. Now, I don't know how I'm going to do that. So give me a second here. Ooh, here we go. Okay, so let's just look at this one more time. So this is one of the text message. So this is one of the messages in the text thread on the same day that John O'Keefe's body is found at 10:52 later in the day, 16 hours into the investigation. Proctor explains, she waffled him. I looked at his body at the hospital. And then somebody asks, she waffled him? He was banged up. I thought he was drunk. Did he get beat up? Nope. So the owner of the house was a woman cop that beat him, right? They're just, these friends are trying to figure out what the hell he's saying. So he's trying to explain. And Proctor says, that's what I initially thought after talking to Canton paramedics, right? That he was in a fight. Then I saw the guy, which is ridiculous because the injuries do not really indicate being hit by a car. But obviously Proctor doesn't know his ass from his elbow. And that's pretty clear from what we're listening to right now. So then he says, what does she waffled him mean? What's the story? His friend says, what does she waffled him mean? What's the story? Proctor says, she hit him with her car. Friend says, oh, Jesus. Okay, yeah, that's fucked up. Intentional or not. That's important, right? So then Proctor says, intentional or not. Very interesting tell, right? So then, now we have the setup for this last text that I want to show you. So he says, gotcha. So he was frozen in the driveway and she didn't see him. In other words, it probably wasn't intentional. She didn't see him. And Proctor says, that's another animal we won't be able to prove. And you wonder, what is another animal? That she didn't see him or that it was intentional, right? What is that What is he really saying there? I'm not 100% sure. I think what he's saying is we won't be able to prove one way or another if it's intentional. And he says, they arrived at the house together. Okay, this is Proctor's explanation of what happened. Okay. They arrived at the house together, got into an argument. She was driving and left. Now, I don't know if you've seen this newer YouTube channel called Truth Revealed, but you need to. If you haven't seen the dissection of Brian Albert, Brian Higgins, and Colin Albert's testimonies, and Jen McCabe, which is a classic, I cannot overlook that. Can't forget Jen McCabe's testimonies, the evaluation that the Truth Revealed guy does is outstanding. Now, he is a former FBI intelligence collection guy. He is a walking lie detector and interrogator. So his job is to analyze language to determine if people are telling the truth or lying. In other words, the way in which a human brain utilizes language and what those patterns say about the words that people use. And one of the things that he says over and over again that has stuck with me, take somebody's words at face value. Notice what they say and notice what they don't say. Don't assume you know, because what we do naturally when we're reading what people say and reading testimony or even hearing it live, we ad lib, like we add what we think somebody means automatically. So in other words, when we read, that's another animal we won't be able to prove, we're all kind of, yeah, we see the words, but we're also adding our assessment of what we think he means to that. And this one, it says they arrived at the house together, got into an argument, she was driving and left. Now, all of us, with the rest of this context, reading through all these text messages, what we, I think, naturally extrapolate from this very short sentence is that what he meant was they arrived at the house together, got into an argument, she was driving, she hit him, and then left. But Proctor doesn't say that. He doesn't say that. And the Truth Revealed guy would tell you if it doesn't say it, they didn't say it. And their language gives you a tremendous amount of information about what's in their head. So here it is. Here's what Proctor's assessment of this case is 16 hours in. They arrived at the house together. Then they got into an argument. She was driving and then left. Doesn't say driving, hit him, and left. And that might be the most important statement we ever hear from Michael Proctor. He never says that she hit him. He says it before, and let's look at that a little bit more closely. Let me go back, see if I can. So when he explains, she waffled him. I looked at his body at the hospital. She waffled him. He was banged up. Okay. I thought he was beat up. Nope. That's what I initially thought after talking to the Canton paramedics. But then I saw the guy. So she hit him with the car. She hit him with her car. Okay. Intentional or not. Okay. So here he's saying she hit him with her car. Intentional or not. But then he says, in the same breath as he's also remembering or he's thinking and analyzing and he's thinking about what he's going to be able to prove and not be able to prove, he then says, they arrived at the house together, got into an argument, she was driving, and left. And then he says, yeah, but there's going to be some serious charges brought on the girl. So this is a really interesting statement to me, and it makes me wonder if in this one sentence, Proctor isn't admitting that he already knows by the end of the first day that Karen did not hit him and that she thinks she could have hit him, but that it would have been an accident, right? In other words, he knows that he's going to use this story. He's going to use the possibility that she was hysterical, that she kept saying, or that she had said at some point, could I have done this? I have a cracked taillight, right? But already knows that the evidence does not point in that direction. Already knows that that is not what the evidence says, that the evidence actually says he was in a fight. They arrived at the house together. They got into an argument. She was driving and she left. She left him there, not she hit him and left him there. That is a giant tell. And at this point, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, at this point, we know for sure that Michael Proctor plants the evidence, the taillight evidence. I mean, we even now know that they went and had the taillight removed from the Lexus. And at that point, it was intact with a little crack, and the piece of taillight was actually stuck inside the Lexus light. So it wasn't outside. It wouldn't have been at the scene because it was pushed in, right? Like it hit something solid. So at this point, we already know that Proctor took the taillight out of the Lexus, had it done because nobody there was competent enough to do it themselves. And at that point, that cop, who I believe is going to be a witness in this next round, in this trial coming up, is going to tell us that that taillight was intact except for the crack and that the piece was inside when he handed it back over to the state police, who had asked him to pull it out of the car. Okay, so fascinating. Okay, and it'd be really interesting to see whether or not that does come out in the second trial, because I think that's pretty pretty unbelievable evidence that she didn't hit him. I mean, if that comes out, I think again at that point this is just over, right? But anyway, the point is, I don't know whether or not Proctor actually believed at this point that Karen did hit him and just didn't think he had enough evidence to prove it. So he plants the taillight pieces because he's trying to make sure she gets found guilty, like to help the investigation, or if he knows that she didn't hit him and is part of a cover up, legitimately 100% outright. At that point, Brian Albert says, "Look, bro, I need you to help me now." I doubt it. My guess is that Proctor was never explicitly told that something else happened, but just never investigated any other possibility and got the hint that this is what he was supposed to do, that he was supposed to make the charges stick on the girl. One other thing that I wanted to point out about the Canton audit that I haven't heard anybody mention yet, while they are complaining, these Canton cops, about the harassment from the public because of the defense theory about a cover-up, one other thing that they say that's really important is that they don't feel supported by local politicians, that they feel they're being thrown under the bus, that they feel that nobody's supporting them, that there's this rift between the higher ups, I guess, if you will, like the district attorney's office and the local Canton cops. That is something that this audit also exposes. So the audit people look like they're standing up for the little guy. That's kind of the position that they're taking. Like, look, this wasn't their fault. They were a tiny little police department. They didn't even have crime scene investigation kits. It wasn't their fault. They weren't trained. They weren't given cell phones. They weren't given cameras. There wasn't established protocol that everybody knew, that everybody followed. And they didn't deal with these very, high profile investigations ever. So there was really no need to train them, right? That's kind of the argument that they're making for the local police department. But it is really clear that they are also exposing a rift between local government and the police department, who feels like they're kind of being thrown under the bus, that they're not being supported outright. But again, This is an interesting tell from Michael Proctor. And if we're following the truth revealed former federal FBI investigator interrogator, we're following his line of thinking. He says, don't ad lib, only take what they say. And what we see here is Michael Proctor telling us what he thinks happened. John and Karen arrived at the house together. They got into an argument. She was driving and left him there. Does not say she was driving, hit him, and left him there. And that is really important, because what we could also likely guess about Michael Proctor in general is that he would have a hard time lying to his buddies. You know, that's another thing that the Truth Revealed guy points out. Lying is really hard. People will go to great lengths to like bend the truth, twist the truth so that it's okay. They make it, they reason it, that they feel comfortable misrepresenting the truth, but outright lying is something that humans will go to great lengths to avoid doing, because one of the things that in psychology we learn is that what hurts human beings maybe more than anything else, and you can really see this with addictions, is when we believe something wholeheartedly and we act in a way that is against what we believe. So if you believe wholeheartedly that it is wrong to lie, that it's a bad thing, that you're a cop, you're supposed to have integrity, you're not supposed to lie, but then you turn around and you lie to your friends, that erodes your integrity. It makes you feel like a bad person, makes you feel like tremendous inner shame and guilt, even if you don't realize it, even if you're not willing to admit it to yourself. And as a result of that, what happens is people then have to do something to resolve that shame. And that's like what substance abuse is all about. So what with addictions, think back to like, if you've ever, when you were young, for me, I was like 16 at a keg party or, with my friends drinking. And maybe I, kiss a guy that I would never have had anything to do with normally. The next morning, I feel terrible guilt and shame. I'm embarrassed. Everybody's going to know. I'm going to be talked about and gossiped about. Okay, so now I feel my behavior was different from how I really felt and what I thought was right for me. And so what do? Now that I'm carrying this guilt and shame, I turn to alcohol or drugs. And that's the pattern. That's the ignition, that sense of going against myself that takes substance abuse from substance abuse into full-blown addiction. That's the psychological engine behind it. And this is such a tell to me. They arrived at the house together, got into an argument, she was driving and left. It never says she was driving and hit him and left. That is so important, you guys. I don't think we should overlook it. I think Proctor's telling us what he believes happened there. And I think he knows already, 16 hours in, that she didn't hit him. And it was just a lot easier for everybody to get behind. Let's just make this cut and dry. Let's put it on the girl. And even his friends are alluding to it. And Michael Proctor is going to go to every length he can to protect Brian Albert, to the point where he never even discloses his name to his buddies, which tells you how much and how strongly Proctor feels about protecting Brian Albert. Again, 16 hours into this investigation. So I think we get almost everything we need to know about this case from these text messages from Michael Proctor. So very, very interesting stuff. And I just wanted to share. Is there anything more that we need to say? Is this like the tell of all tells? I don't know. Does this say it all? I don't know. To me, I feel like that's an admission from Proctor, and I think it's probably an important one. So with that, I bid you a farewell. Everybody, thank you so much for your time and your effort and your attention. Stay safe. I can't wait to start my very first live in a week. Wish me luck with my school hell that I am in, and I will see you on the other side.
God save the Commonwealth.